She watched his life unfold, but never dared to speak. Every night I'd sit by my window, the world outside shrinking to a single frame, his window, his life. The soft glow of his living room, the flicker of his TV, the way he'd lean back in his chair, laughing at something I couldn't hear. It was like watching a movie where I knew every scene but none of the lines. I wasn't supposed to care this much. He was married. He was a stranger. But in the quiet of my apartment, where the walls felt too close and the silence too heavy, his life became my escape. I'd pour a glass of wine, dim my lights, and let myself disappear into the rhythm of his evenings. The way he'd stretch his arms after a long day, his shoulders easing as if shedding the weight of the world. The way his wife's shadow moved behind him, unaware of my gaze, her presence a quiet reminder of the line I was crossing. I told myself it was harmless. Just a habit. A way to fill the emptiness that clung to me like damp air. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew the ache in my chest wasn't just loneliness, it was longing. For him. For a life I'd never touch. For something to make me feel alive again. And then, one night, everything changed. I was at my window, lost in the usual routine, my wineglass sweating in my hand, when his eyes lifted. Straight toward me. My breath caught, sharp and jagged, like I'd swallowed glass. My heart slammed against my ribs, loud enough to drown out the city's hum. He saw me. Not just a glance, but a stare, steady, knowing, like he'd always known I was there. The air felt thick, electric, pressing against my skin. I couldn't move. Couldn't look away. In that moment, I wasn't just a woman in the dark apartment across the street. I was exposed. Seen. My pulse raced, a mix of fear and something else, something dangerous, something I didn't want to name. And the worst part? I didn't want to hide. What happens when the one you watch watches back? I wasn't ready for the answer, but I couldn't stop myself from finding out. This is the story of what happened when our eyes met, and how it unraveled everything I thought I knew about myself. I'm not sure when it started. Maybe it was the first night I couldn't sleep, when the hum of my refrigerator felt louder than my thoughts, a constant drone that kept me tethered to the present. I'd moved into this apartment 6 months ago, after a breakup that left me feeling like a ghost in my own life. 32, single, no kids, no pets, just me and a stack of unpacked boxes I couldn't bring myself to open. They sat in the corner, collecting dust, a reminder of a life I'd left behind but hadn't quite let go of. The city was loud, car horns, distant sirens, the chatter of strangers spilling out of bars, but my world was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps into your bones and makes you feel like you're disappearing. That's when I noticed him. My neighbor. The man across the street, in the brownstone with the big bay window that seemed to glow like a stage. His life seemed so alive. I'd see him come home around 7, his tie loosened, his shoulders relaxed, like he was stepping into a world where everything made sense. He'd toss his keys on the counter with a casual flick, pour a drink, and settle into his routine. His wife would appear sometimes, tall, graceful, with hair that caught the light like it was meant to be admired. They'd laugh, or argue, or just sit together in a comfortable silence, and I'd watch, piecing together their story like a puzzle I'd never solve. I didn't know their names then, but I knew their rhythms. The way they moved through their evenings felt like a dance I wasn't invited to, but I couldn't stop watching. I didn't mean to make it a habit. It started small, innocent enough. A glance while I was making coffee, the kettle hissing as my eyes drifted to his window. A moment of distraction while I scrolled through my phone, my thumb pausing as his silhouette caught my attention. But soon, I was arranging my evenings around him. I'd dim my lights so he wouldn't see me, so I could stay invisible. I'd sit in the same chair, a worn-out armchair that creaked under my weight, my heart picking up speed when his silhouette appeared. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was crossing a line, even if it was just in my head. But it wasn't about him, not really. It was about what he represented. A life that felt full, vibrant, connected. A life where someone came home to you, where laughter filled the spaces between silences. I didn't have that. My nights were empty, my days a blur of work and routine, and in the quiet, I felt like I was fading. So I watched him. I'd imagine what it would be like to be the one he smiled at, the one he reached for across the table. I'd invent conversations we'd never have, moments we'd never share, quiet dinners, walks in the rain, his hand brushing mine in a way that felt like a promise. In my mind, he wasn't just a man across the street. He was someone who saw me. Really saw me. Someone who could pull me out of the gray haze of my life and make me feel solid again. His name was Daniel. I learned it by accident, one night when their window was cracked open and his wife's voice carried across the street. "Daniel, can you grab the wine?" she'd called, her tone light but tired, like they'd had this conversation 100 times. Daniel. It fit him, strong, steady, the kind of name you could lean into, like a wall that wouldn't crumble. I didn't know much else about him. He was maybe 40, with dark hair that fell just a little too long over his forehead, giving him a boyish charm that softened the lines of his face. He wore glasses sometimes, when he was reading, perched low on his nose like he didn't care if they slipped. He liked whiskey, neat, poured into a heavy glass he'd swirl absently while staring into space. I'd watch him, lost in thought, and wonder what was on his mind. Was he happy? Did he feel trapped in that perfect-looking life? Did he ever look out his window and wonder about the world beyond it? About the woman in the dark apartment across the street? I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. I wasn't stealing anything. I was just watching. Filling the empty spaces in my nights with something that felt alive, something that made my heart beat a little faster. But every time I sat by that window, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, "This isn't okay. You're not okay." I ignored it. I pushed it down, buried it under the weight of my longing. Until the night he looked back. It was a Thursday, one of those heavy summer nights where the air felt like it was pressing against your skin, thick with humidity and unspoken tension. I was at my window, like always, my glass of wine half empty, the room dark except for the faint glow of my phone on the table. Daniel was there, in his usual spot, but something was different. His wife wasn't home. He was alone, pacing, his movements sharper than usual, like a man carrying a weight he couldn't set down. I leaned forward, my breath fogging the glass, my pulse quickening. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, and then, he looked up. Right at me. I froze. My heart was a drumbeat in my chest, loud and unsteady, each thump echoing in my ears. I told myself it was nothing. A coincidence. He couldn't see me, not with my lights off, not from this distance across the street. But his eyes didn't move. They locked onto mine, and for one unbearable second, it felt like he was staring straight into my soul. I wanted to duck, to hide, to pretend I hadn't been caught. But I couldn't. I just sat there, pinned by his gaze, my hands trembling, the wineglass cold against my palm. And then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his glass. Not a wave. Not a smile. Just a small, intentional gesture, like he was saying, "I know you're there. I've always known." I stumbled back from the window, my wineglass tipping over, spilling red across the floor like blood. My breath came in short, jagged gasps, my chest tight with panic. He'd seen me. Not just tonight, but maybe every night. How long had he known? Had he felt my eyes on him, night after night, while I'd built this fantasy in my head? The thought made my stomach twist with shame, a hot, sour feeling that crawled up my throat. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't safe in my little world of shadows. The illusion I'd built, the one that let me pretend I was just a spectator, was gone. I cleaned up the wine, my hands shaking, my mind racing. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe he hadn't really seen me. But deep down, I knew better. That look, it wasn't accidental. It was heavy, loaded, like he'd been waiting for me to slip, to reveal myself. The next morning, I avoided the window. I kept my blinds shut, my apartment dim, the light barely seeping through the slats. I busied myself with work, with emails, with anything to keep my mind off him. But the pull was still there, tugging at me, a quiet ache that wouldn't let go. I told myself I'd stop. That I'd move on, find something else to fill my nights. But by evening, I was back in my chair, my heart racing as I peeked through a crack in the blinds. He was there, same as always, sitting with his whiskey, his silhouette framed against the warm light of his living room. But now it felt different. Every move he made felt like a message. The way he glanced toward the window, his eyes lingering a moment too long. The way he lingered by the glass, like he was waiting. For what? For me to look again? To acknowledge what had happened? My mind spun with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. Days passed, and the tension grew, coiling tighter with every night I spent at that window. I couldn't stop watching, but now it wasn't just about longing. It was about fear. Fear that he knew too much. Fear that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And yet, I couldn't stay away. I'd catch myself staring, my mind spiraling with questions. Did he think I was pathetic, some lonely woman spying on his life? Did he pity me? Or worse, did he feel something too? The thought sent a shiver through me, equal parts thrill and dread. I didn't want to know the answer, but I couldn't stop asking the question. One night, it happened again. I was watching, my lights off, my breath. Then he set it down, stood, and walked to the window. My heart stopped, a cold jolt running through me. He didn't look at me this time. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, staring out into the night. His silhouette was sharp against the light, his posture relaxed but deliberate, like he knew I was there. It felt like a challenge. Like he was daring me to show myself, to step out of the shadows and admit what I'd been doing. I didn't. I couldn't. My hands gripped the arms of my chair, my nails digging into the fabric. The weight of that moment pressed against me, heavy and suffocating, like the air before a storm. The next day, I saw him outside. It was the first time I'd seen him up close, not through glass, not through the safety of distance. He was leaving his building, a grocery bag in one hand, his phone in the other, his eyes scanning the street. I was on my way to the corner store, my head down, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I didn't mean to look at him, but I did. And he looked back. Not a glance, but a real look, slow, deliberate, like he was studying me, taking me in. My mouth went dry, my throat tight. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence that hung between us like a thread about to snap. But my voice wouldn't come. He nodded, just once, a small, measured movement, and walked away. That nod, it wasn't friendly. It wasn't cold. It was something else, something that made my skin prickle and my thoughts spin. It was acknowledgement. Recognition. Like he was saying, I see you. I know. After that, I started noticing things. Small things, subtle shifts that felt like they were meant for me. The way his curtains stayed open longer, the fabric pulled back just enough to give me a clearer view. The way he paused by the window, his silhouette framed against the light, his movements slow and deliberate. Was he doing it on purpose? Was he playing with me, testing me, drawing me deeper into this silent game? Or was I imagining it, my mind twisting every detail into something it wasn't? I didn't know anymore. The line between reality and fantasy was blurring, and I was losing myself in it. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. The shame burned, a constant heat in my chest, but the pull was stronger. Every night, I'd sit by my window, waiting for him to look back, waiting for something to break, whether it was him, or me, or this fragile, forbidden thing we'd built without ever speaking. The weeks blurred together, each night bleeding into the next, a haze of guilt and yearning. I stopped pretending it was harmless. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but it was like an addiction, a need I couldn't shake. The more I watched, the more I needed to watch. And the more I watched, the more I hated myself for it. I'd lie awake at night, replaying that first moment when his eyes met mine, the way his gaze had held me, stripped me bare. It was a moment I couldn't escape, a memory that clung to me like damp clothes. I'd tell myself I'd stop tomorrow. That I'd close the blinds, pack up my chair, move on with my life. I'd make promises to myself in the dark, my voice barely a whisper, as if saying it out loud would make it real. But tomorrow always came, and I was still there, still watching, still caught in the pull of his window. I started noticing cracks in his perfect life, little fractures I hadn't seen before. The way his shoulders tensed when his wife walked into the room, a subtle shift that spoke of unspoken strain. The way their laughter felt forced, like they were performing for an audience that wasn't there, maybe for each other, maybe for themselves. I'd watch them sit together, their bodies close but their eyes distant, and I'd wonder if his life was as hollow as mine. Was he as trapped as I was, bound by routine, by expectations, by a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty within? I started imagining him watching me back, not out of curiosity, but out of need. Like he was searching for something, too, a connection, a spark, a way to feel alive again. The thought was dangerous, intoxicating, and I let it take root, let it grow until it filled the empty spaces in my mind. One night I saw them argue. It wasn't loud, not like the fights you see in movies, all shouting and slammed doors. It was quiet, sharp, the kind of argument that cuts deeper because of what's left unsaid. She was pacing, her hands gesturing in quick, frustrated bursts, while he stood still, his face unreadable. I couldn't hear their words, but I could feel the weight of them, heavy and jagged. She grabbed her coat, slung it over her arm, and stormed out, the door closing with a soft thud that echoed in my chest. He just stood there, staring at the door, his hands clenched at his sides. Then he turned to the window. To me. I don't know if he could see me, but it felt like he could. Like he was asking me to understand, to see him in a way she couldn't. I pressed my hand against the glass, my heart aching for him, for me, for this strange, silent connection we built without ever speaking. My fingers trembled against the cold pane, and for a moment, I wanted to open my window, to call out to him, to break the silence that held us apart. But I didn't. I just sat there, my breath fogging the glass, my heart a tangle of guilt and longing. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He started spending more time by the window, his movements deliberate, like he was performing for me. He'd stand there, his hands in his pockets, his gaze drifting toward my apartment. I'd catch myself holding my breath, waiting for him to raise his glass again, to acknowledge me in that quiet, knowing way. And when he didn't, the disappointment was a physical thing, heavy in my chest, like a stone I couldn't dislodge. I started leaving my blinds open, just a little, letting the light spill out from my apartment. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to know I was still there, still watching, still caught in this silent dance we'd started. It was reckless, I knew that, but the shame wasn't enough to stop me. The pull was too strong, the need too deep. One evening, I saw him outside again. It was raining, a soft drizzle that made the streetlights blur into halos of gold and white. He was standing under an awning across the street, his collar turned up against the cold, his breath visible in the damp air. I was on my way home from work, my umbrella shielding my face, my shoes splashing through shallow puddles. I don't know what made me do it, but I stopped. I lowered my umbrella, letting the rain soak my hair, my coat, my skin. I looked at him, and he looked back. For a moment the world was just us, two strangers, caught in a glance that felt like a confession, like we were saying everything we'd never dared to say out loud. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but they held mine with a weight that made my chest ache. I wanted to speak, to ask him who he was, what he felt, why he looked at me like that. But before I could find the words, he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the rain. I was left standing there, the rain mixing with the tears I hadn't realized were falling, my heart heavy with a grief I couldn't name. I went home and cried. Not because of him, not really. Because of me. Because of how far I'd let this go. I'd built a whole world around a man I didn't know, a man who belonged to someone else. I'd let myself believe that his glances, his pauses, His silences meant something. Something real, something shared. But what if they didn't? What if I was just a lonely woman, staring through a window, chasing a fantasy that would never be real? The thought was a knife, sharp and cold, cutting through the haze I'd wrapped myself in. I'd let myself fall into this, let it consume me, and now I was drowning in it. The shame was overwhelming, but so was the longing, and I didn't know how to untangle the two. I tried to stop. I really did. I moved my chair to the other side of the room, where the window was just a sliver of light behind the blinds. I kept those blinds shut for 3 days, forcing myself to stay away, to focus on anything else, work, books, the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. But the pull was too strong, a current I couldn't fight. On the 4th night, I was back at the window, my heart in my throat, my hands trembling as I parted the blinds. He was there, like always, but something was different. His wife was home, and they were sitting together on the couch, closer than I'd seen in weeks. She reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his, and he let her take it. They were talking, their heads bent toward each other, their voices too soft to carry across the street. I waited for him to look at the window, to look at me, to give me some sign that he felt it too. He didn't. His eyes stayed on her, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, and that's when I knew. Whatever I'd thought we had, whatever I'd built in my mind, it was over. The realization was quiet, but it hit me like a wave, cold and heavy, pulling me under. I don't watch anymore. The window's still there, its glass cold and unyielding, but I keep the blinds closed. I moved my chair back to the living room, where it belongs, where it can't tempt me to look again. I'm trying to unpack those boxes, to fill the silence with something real, something that's mine. I've started small, sorting through old photos, folding clothes I'd forgotten I owned, playing music to drown out the quiet. But some nights, when the city's too quiet and my thoughts are too loud, I still feel it. That ache. That pull. It's softer now, but it's there, a shadow that lingers in the corners of my mind. I wonder if he ever thinks about me, about the woman who watched him from the dark. I wonder if he ever felt it too, that unspoken thing that hung between us, fragile and forbidden, like a thread stretched too tight. I'll never know. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some stories don't need an ending. They just need to be felt, to be carried, to be remembered in the quiet moments when the world feels too heavy. I saw him one last time, a few weeks later. I was leaving for work, my bag slung over my shoulder, my eyes on the sidewalk. He was on his stoop, checking his mail, his glasses perched on his nose. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I thought he might say something, might break the silence that had defined us. But he just nodded, like he had before, a small, measured gesture that felt like a goodbye. He went inside, the door clicking shut behind him, and I stood there, my breath catching in my throat. That nod, it was closure in a way. A quiet acknowledgement that we'd shared something, even if it was just a glance, just a moment that lived in the spaces between us. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I don't know if I want to. But I know I'll carry this with me, the weight of it, the shame of it, the strange, sad beauty of it. It's a part of me now, woven into the fabric of who I am, a reminder of what happens when you let yourself want something you can't have. Have you ever felt a connection you couldn't explain? Something that lived in the spaces between words, between glances, something that made your heart ache for no reason at all. Comment below and tell me, did her story make your heart ache? Share it with someone who'd understand, someone who knows what it's like to feel something you can't name. And if you want more tales of forbidden glances, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes, the things we never say are the ones that stay with us the longest.